We're pleased our next speaker will be Dr. Davis Bitton. Davis is a retired University of Utah history professor. After serving a mission in France, he graduated from BYU and then received his MA and PhD degrees from Princeton University. He has taught at the University of Texas and the University of California at Santa Barbara and served for 10 years as assistant church historian. Dr. Bitton is co-author with Leonard J. Arrington of The Mormon Experience, A History of the Latter-day Saints, and Saints Without Halos, The Human Side of Mormon History. He compiled a guide to Mormon diaries and autobiographies, and his most recent books are Images of the Prophet Joseph Smith and George Q. Cannon, a biography. Many of Davis's books are available in our bookstore in the back, and I'm sure that he'll be interested in talking with each of you as we have the Meet the Author sessions later today. He asked me to cut the biography just a little bit short, but I invite you to read it. It's in your program. At this time, we'd like to turn the time over to Dr. Davis Bitton.
You have two previous papers on homosexuality and feminism. It's hard to revert back to the distant historical past, but I've been told that some of the issues that trouble some of our members and others are historical issues, and so I've decided to talk a little bit about my perspective under the title, I Don't Have a Testimony of the History of the Church. I don't have a testimony of the history of the church. That's why I can be a historian and also a believing Latter-day Saint. I will expand on this idea, but first let me address some related questions. Do all well-informed historians become anti-Mormons? The critic would have you believe that they are disinterested pursuers of truth. There they were, minding their own business, going about their conscientious study of church history. And shock and dismay, they came across this, whatever this is, that blew them away. As hurtful as it is for them, they can no longer believe in the church. And out of love for you, they now want to help you see the light of the day. Well, let's get one thing clear. There is nothing in church history, zilch, nada, that leads inevitably to the conclusion that the church is false. There is nothing that requires the conclusion that Joseph Smith was a fraud. How can I say this with such confidence? For the simple reason that the historians who know most about our church history have been and are faithful, committed members of the church. Or to restate the situation more precisely, there are faithful Latter-day Saint historians who know as much about the subject as any anti-Mormon, or as anyone who writes on the subject from an outside perspective. With few exceptions, they know much, much more. They have not been blown away. They have not gnashed their teeth and abandoned their faith. To repeat, they have found nothing that forces the extreme conclusion that our enemies like to promote. We need to reject the simple-minded, inaccurate picture that divides people into two classes. On the one hand, according to our enemies, are the sincere seekers of truth. On the other, the sincere seekers of truth, full of goodness and charity. On the other hand, in their view, stand the ignorant Mormons. Even faithful Mormon scholars, according to them, must be ignorant. Otherwise, they are dishonest, playing their part in a conspiracy to deceive people. Can we see how ridiculous this picture is? It is a travesty on both sides. Many Latter-day Saints may not know their history in depth, but some of them know a good deal. As for Latter-day Saint scholars, as a group, they compare favorably with any similar group of historians. It will not do to charge them with being dishonest. I happen to know most of them and have no hesitation in rejecting this smear of their character. On the other hand, your typical anti-Mormon is no disinterested pursuer of the truth. If you are confronted with a problem or some kind of non-faith promoting take on church history, the chances are that your willing helper can lay no claim to doing any significant research in Mormon history. Oblivious to the primary sources, unread in the journal literature, the critic has picked up his nugget from previous anti-Mormon writers and offers it to you as though it is a fresh discovery. Most of the time, it is anything but new. It is a stock item in a litany of anti-Mormon claims that serve their purpose. It is a broken record. Well, why does it accomplish anything? Because they don't tell you how stale it is, and of course will not let you know where answers have already been provided. To you, it is new, or may be new, and following into the trap, you think you have been deceived by the church. And here is something that is seriously damaging to the restored gospel. Like peddlers of snake oil from time immemorial, the critic is willing to take full advantage of this situation. A recent man with a broken lance provides us with a good example of the impression they wish to convey. In his preface, Grant Palmer lists the faculty of Brigham Young University, the Joseph Fielding Smith Institute for Church History, scholars from other disciplines, seminary and institute faculty, and the Mormon History Association as those who have published, critiqued, and reevaluated a veritable mountain of evidence. The impression he wishes to leave is that all these people reject traditional church history, favoring his own interpretation. Question time. How many historians who are deeply familiar with the sources on Mormon origins still find it possible to remain in the fold and are not swept away by the breezy arguments that this book presents? Palmer doesn't tell us. There are quite a few things he doesn't tell us. We might start with a few names like Richard Bushman, James B. Allen, Glenn Leonard, Richard Anderson, Larry Porter, Milton Bachman, Dean Jesse, and Ronald Walker, all of whom are thoroughly familiar with the issues and sources. Joining their ranks are younger historians like Stephen Harper and Mark Ashurst McGee, and I have left out many other names. I am not claiming that all historians are believing Mormons. That would be patently absurd. The person who approaches Mormons in their history for the first time and tries to evaluate the historiography discovers that from the beginning, disbelieving historians have written about these events. They will also come across historians like Hubert Howe Bancroft, who simply put the truth question on the shelf. No one denies that such approaches are possible. But our novice will also quickly discover important work by Latter-day Saint scholars. In other words, those who know most about Mormon history do not simply and inevitably join the ranks of the disbelievers. It is quite possible, apparently, to know a great deal about Mormon history and still be a practicing, believing Latter-day Saint. Why do I spend time insisting on this simple, obvious fact? Because our opponents want to leave the opposite impression, and because for many Latter-day Saints it is sufficient to know that faithful historians who are thoroughly familiar with the issues do not accept the interpretations and conclusions of the would-be destroyers of faith. I have not discussed any specific historical issues. My point is simpler than that. It is simply this: historians who have devoted many years of study to this material and to these issues have not felt compelled to abandon their faith in the restored gospel. Expectation. May I reminisce just a little?